Alright, so Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I would like to welcome all audiences that we have today. Basically, we could have audience from Malaysia, from Al-Quds, and even UK, because right now from the poster you can see that it is currently 9 p.m. in Malaysia, 4 p.m. in Palestine, and 2 p.m. in UK. So, as for tonight, we will be discussing about a topic relating to something that actually massively influence our daily lives, which is relating to media. And tonight's topic is specifically about media bias while reporting on Palestine issue. So I think we are lucky to have someone that is prominent in the field of activism and journalists to talk about this topic today, which I will be introduced about her after this. So without further ado, let me introduce about Dr. Yvonne Ridley. She is basically a worldwide known journalist and activist. She is the vocal supporter of humanitarian issues like Palestine, Afghanistan, Iraq, Rohingya, Xinjiang, and many more. And she's been writing to media as a journalist, such as the Sunday Times, the Observer, the Express newspapers, and many more. And even I read that she wrote few books before this. So after this, Dr. Yvonne will introduce about her more to us. And I think I can start with the first question to Dr. Yvonne. So basically, it is a big why about tonight's topic, which is why is there a media bias when reporting about Palestine? Why is it media bias only to Palestine issue? So please welcome Dr. Yvonne.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and salam alaikum, and welcome to all of the sisters and everyone who's tuned in today to this very important subject, because there is an imbalance in the way that the Western media in particular reports the Palestinian issue. I'm afraid that the media gives a really distorted coverage when issuing news bulletins about matters related to Palestine. And in fact, I find that there's a deeply troubling pattern in most of these reports. And what alarms me is not only the misrepresentation of the Palestinian struggle, but what journalists often leave out is quite glaring as well. And I can imagine that should Palestinians still watch Western news coverage of their situation, they must be screaming at the television, saying, why don't you mention this? Why don't you mention that? There's a very distinct bias. For instance, the rocket attacks. We constantly hear news about Palestinian rocket attacks in civilian areas. And what you've got to remember is that the Palestinians have no real military force. For instance, in Gaza, there's a 2 million civilian population living in the most overcrowded conditions you'll find it anywhere in the world. Yet when the media reports about rocket attacks from Palestine, they report about it as though the Palestinians have an equal military capability with the Israeli military. The Israeli military is extremely advanced. It's the fourth largest army in the world in terms of military spending and budgets and equipment. And this is for a country that isn't the size of a South African game park. Which again, the media fails to report. But since about 2000, about 30 Israelis have been killed in Palestinian rocket attacks, compared to more than 4,000 Palestinians killed in airstrikes. Remember, the Palestinians have no air force. They have little or nothing to defend themselves against Apache attack helicopters, Hellfire missiles, fighter jets, smart bombs, tanks, etc. And in terms of military aid, American taxpayers fork out around about $10 million a day, compared to $0 in military support to the Palestinians from the same source. So, we need to get a context, and unfortunately, the media doesn't do this.
Yes. So yeah, basically, you talked just now, we know that some of the mainstream media act unjust to what is happening actually in Palestine and so on. So from your point of view as a journalist, what do you think the media today should act differently about delivering the facts today?
Well, as a journalist, telling the truth has become almost a revolutionary act in 2020. It seems that many news sources are incapable of giving us a full picture, which is why I think in the West, circulations of newspapers are plummeting. The print industry is in crisis, and it's because the next generation is seeking its news from alternative news sites and online agencies that don't have multi-billionaire publishers who have their own political agendas as well. So it's this isn't just for the Palestine-Israeli conflict. This is involved in issues throughout the world. So I don't want anybody jumping saying, "Oh, she's blaming the whims of these newspaper barons, that they're under the thumb of the Israelis." I'm not suggesting that for 1 minute, but they do drive forward their own agenda.
I see. All right. So what do you think? Are we actually have some media that we can rely on when we talk about Palestine issue? Is there any media that we can believe on as a valid website to trust, or website or trusted sources about the Palestine issue?
Well, you've got Al Jazeera, Arabic. The English side is sometimes lacking, but certainly you can rely on Al Jazeera Arabic to give a more informed and enlightened news source. Press TV, which is run by the Iranians, does have a stronger context with the Palestinian issue and does a good job in reporting the conflict there. There are numerous online news websites. I write, for instance, for Middle East Monitor, Memo.
Oh, I see.
Which does an excellent job in informing events that are happening around the Middle East, in particular Palestine. Mondweiss, and I've probably pronounced that incorrectly. There are all sorts of news sites that people can go online. It's a fact that readers and viewers now have to seek out their own news sources and try and get a balance in that. And if you feel as though you're not getting the full story, then search around until you're happy that you're getting a 3D view of events that are happening or unfolding in the Middle East. But, journalism is the gold standard that was set in the West years ago has long gone.
I see. So I think we can say that basically not all media mainstream just post a fake think and justice about what is happening in Palestine, because there is still like a valid source that we can see as that we can see to know more about Palestine issue, what is happening right now. So basically, Dr. Yvonne, as activist in the field about humanitarian issues, we can see that after many years has passed, people are still debate on who is actually the aggressor in the Palestine issue. Is it the Zionist Israel, or is it the Palestinians that starts the attack first? What do you think about this?
Well, instead of trying to point the finger of blame, because inevitably rocket attacks from Palestine draw a huge firepower from Israel. But sometimes the rocket attacks are in response to something that the Israelis have done. And I want, imagine in Gaza, you don't have the benefit of electricity 24/7, and the few hours that the power is on, it can suddenly be switched off like that on the whim of someone in Tel Aviv who decides, right, let's switch the power off in Gaza, let's cut the water off in Gaza. 95% of the water is unfit to drink in Gaza. And, when you consider all aid has to go through either Egypt or Israel, it's horrendous. The Palestinians are undergoing and have undergone a brutal occupation for more than 70 years now. There are millions of Palestinian refugees out there who have the right under international law to return. So, I would urge Western journalists and their masters to really start and introduce a little bit of balance, at least, into the style of reporting and coverage that we get in Palestine.
Yes, I would agree on that. Basically, it's not only for the Western journalists, but for all the journalists around the world. We have to give facts about what is actually happening in the world right now, regardless Palestine issue or any other humanitarian issues.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been a journalist for more than 40 years. And, telling the truth is a very noble profession. But some people don't want to hear the truth. And it doesn't matter where in the globe they live. Some people take offense by the truth, which is why I said before, trying to tell the truth as a journalist is almost becoming a revolutionary act. There are powerful people in powerful places who do very bad things, and they don't want journalists reporting the news on the ground. But again, I am optimistic simply because of these little guys, these iPhones that people have and recorders. And now we're beginning to see more and more citizen journalism of events that are happening on the ground, where news crews can't get access or are banned from going. I went to cover the Palestinian elections in Gaza and was stopped at an Israeli checkpoint and wasn't allowed through. Imagine that. I'm going to report on elections in Gaza and another country is saying, no, you can't do that. It's quite shocking.
Yeah. So basically, I think this is like new questions to you, since you are the journalist. Basically, journalists, they have to know, like, they must know about the truth. But why do you think some of the journalists choose to tell the world about something else from what they know and what they see about the truth?
Well, the pro-Israeli lobby is extremely active and very powerful. And they exert pressure on news sources, news stations, radio stations, and any little crumb given to the Palestinians is usually followed by a deluge of complaints. And you know, when I'm talking about the pro-Israeli lobby, I am not talking about Jews. I am talking about people of faith, people of no faith, people who give their undiluted support to Israel. And those people have little or nothing to do with Judaism and the great religion that is Judaism. So I want to make that clear because, you know, there are hackneyed tropes going around blaming Jewish people for controlling the media control. You know, it's not true. Pro-Israeli lobby, which is something quite different, is very active and knows how to use pressure.
Yeah, so basically that is the reality for the journalist, right? So move on to the next question, which is from your point of view, what are some taboo words that the media knows to be true, but they will never use them while publish their writing and whatnot?
Well, about 2 or 3 years ago, the media produced lots of images of an Israeli fighter jet that had been painted pink. And this was the Israeli state doing its bit to highlight and promote women's breast cancer. And it was part of the breast cancer campaign where everybody around the world wore a little pink ribbon to raise awareness for breast cancer. And you think, wonderful, you know, it's a great gesture. And here is a military that is, you know, has gone as far as to paint its fighter jet pink to promote awareness about breast cancer. Now, if I was a journalist, I would have reported that and said, isn't that wonderful? However, why are Palestinian women who are suffering from breast cancer refused access to hospitals for life-saving treatment because they're stopped at Israeli checkpoints? That's the other side of the story, and that's the story that isn't being reported. That you know, on the one hand, let's raise awareness for the horrors of breast cancer, but on the other hand, let's not mention the hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinian women who are suffering from breast cancer, who are dying from breast cancer, and they cannot get treatment because of the Israeli checkpoints, because of access to hospitals that could save their lives. Now then, that I would imagine will cause a great deal of angst and pain, especially among the women who are listening to this today, because no woman in the 21st century, regardless of who she is or how she prays or what her skin color or nationality is, no woman should be denied access to treatment for breast cancer. And yet that is what is happening to Palestinian women who are suffering under this brutal Israeli occupation.
Yeah, so basically we know that medical treatment is like one of injustice that is happening to the Palestinians because of what is happening there right now. So I would like to read one question from the audiences, which is from Shafika Shukul. She said that are there any specific authority that protects the quality of news reported by journalists all over the world?
Sorry, are there any
specific authority that protects the quality of news reported by journalists all over the world?
Well, as I said before, it's we can't trust the news that comes in Western newspapers. We have to go elsewhere to get it verified, to get it checked. And we have to become our own researchers if we really want to be informed with what is happening in the Middle East. I mean, I was asked recently to write an article about how Palestinian women are portrayed in the media. And there's two Palestinian icons that I'd love to talk about today. One is Ruzan Ashraf Abdul Qadir al-Najjar, and she was the volunteer paramedic who was killed by Israeli Defense Forces in 2018 during the Right to Return marches at the Gaza border. And the other, you'll all know, as blonde-haired Ahad Tamimi, who at the age of 16 became the international face of Palestinian resistance in the occupied West Bank after a video of her slapping and kicking an Israeli soldier stationed outside her home in Nabi Saleh went viral in December 2017. The media obsessed over Razan's colourful hijabs and turned her into an icon long before she was slain by Israeli snipers, rather than focus on why her life-saving services were needed during what should have been peaceful protests. The Western journalists preoccupied themselves with this angel who was running around ducking and diving, tear gas and sniper fire, to help other people. And as I say, the journalists focused on the color of her hijab instead of saying, why is this happening? And as for Ahad, the Western journalists became very preoccupied with her luxurious wild mane of curly hair. And they used a play on words and called her Shirley Temper instead of Shirley Temple. And they used headlines like illegally blonde. And one journalist, Ben Enrique, in 2012, he profiled the Tamimi family for the New York Times magazine. And this is what he wrote about Ahad. Unavoidably, she is blonde and light-skinned and light-eyed. A great deal of work goes into othering Palestinians, to casting them as some really recognizable other. But when suddenly the kid doesn't fit into those stereotypes, when she actually looks like a European kid or an American kid, then suddenly all that work of dehumanization can't function, and she can't be othered in the same way. And that's when people freak out. And that's quite an astute observation by him. But less nuanced were the words of the Danish journalist Soren Willemoes, who wrote on a Facebook post that she was, and I can't believe, forgive me for repeating this, she was a Lolita of the barricades, adding rather creepily, in my view, that photographs of her wearing a tight t-shirt enabled him to just about notice her nipples. What has that got to do with the Palestinian conflict? And so such focus, must be greeted with total dismay by all Palestinians, not least of all the women who want an end to this 8-decade struggle They simply want their stolen lands back. But sadly, some Western journalists are so easily distracted into fixating on external appearances and not the real issues of the Palestine cause for the Palestinians. And it just has no bearing on the really heroic struggle and acts of resistance by the Palestinian people.
Yes, we should see more on the values that what they did, their struggles, instead of like the physical figures to what is happening. So just a reminder to audiences, if you have any question, please feel free to write your questions in the comments Facebook below. All right, so moving on to the next questions. I think from the media users' perspective, we can see that Israel Zionist is likely to win the media mainstream about the fake news of Palestine. So, do you agree with this statement? And what actually we can do to convert or manipulate what is happening?
Well, first of all, let me give you a definition of Zionism, a political ideology from the 19th century which bears no relation to the religious foundation of Judaism, which is thousands and thousands of years old. So, people try and conflate Zionism and Judaism, and it's wrong. Zionism is a political ideology which is not only espoused by some Jews, but it's espoused by about 50 million Christian Zionists in America who support the US President Donald Trump. These are people from the extreme Christian right, and they too are Zionists. And this is something that should be made quite clear.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And yet the media will continue to conflate Zionism with Judaism. And the reality is not all Jews are Zionists and not all Zionists are Jews. In fact, I've just said, 50 million are Christian evangelicals who support Donald Trump. So they do know, the pro-Israeli lobby does know how to exert pressure. They use their money to influence politicians. You look at politicians across the world, and in America and Britain, they have to declare where they get their money from. And it's there are substantial amounts paid to some politicians by the pro-Israeli lobby. It's a matter of fact, and it's there on public record for people to see.
Yeah, so basically, from what we have discussed now, we come to the question that what do you think about the current media? Do you think we have improved on talking about Palestine issue, or we are getting worse about that?
Well, you just look at the latest headlines about the UAE normalizing relations with Israel. The UAE said, we've done this because we want to stop Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, from annexing a huge swathe of land in the occupied West Bank, because Netanyahu has said, I'm going to take 30% of this land for Israel, and he's stated that quite openly. But within hours of signing that agreement, and within hours of the UAE rulers saying, this is why we've agreed to normalization because we want to save Palestinian lands. Netanyahu said, no, there are no guarantees, and the annexation plans are not off the table.
Yeah.
Why did nobody in the Western media go back to the Emiratis and say, actually, Netanyahu said your signature doesn't make an ounce of difference. He's still going to go after the lands at a time that suits him.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, this inconsistent reporting and reporting of only one side and not the other is glaringly obvious.
Yeah, so maybe I can read one question from the comment, which is from Ahmad Helmi. He said that there are lots of evidence about the invasion from Israelis from Palestine. As we can see, their state are being reduced from a big Palestine at 1947 till birthing nowadays. So basically, how did many people miss this clear information, and why do people just turn a blind eye before the media even needs to sugarcoat it? So what do you?
Well, some journalists, as I say, the Israeli lobby is very powerful, and some journalists are often accused of being anti-Semitic by criticizing Israel, and of course this is a nonsense. Criticism of Israel should be allowed. And if you stop all criticism of Israel, then you are stopping freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And of course, Israel likes to boast that it's the only democracy in the Middle East, but it isn't really, because anyone who dares to criticize Israel is attacked. And you know, just the attacks are unrelenting. They, you know, and so this is something that we must stand up to, and we must combat. The problem of anti-Semitism is very real indeed, but it isn't coming from Muslim countries. It is coming from the rise of the far right in Europe. And I'm amazed that nobody is drawing parallels in the mainstream media with the rise of the far right to what happened in the 1930s, when Jewish people were horrifically demonized and targeted and abused and persecuted across Europe. And here we are seeing exactly the same demonization process again. But don't conflate it with what is happening in Israel. You know, it does a disservice not, you know, if you see something wrong that is happening in Israel today, and let's face it, there's plenty going on, then sort of criticism should be legitimate.
Yes. All right. So, Dr. Yvonne, you have experiencing being a journalist for a long time. Do you think social media can actually put pressure from the mainstream media about the truth that they have to deliver to the world?
Well, what is happening? People are going off into divisions, aren't they? I mean, you've got the Fox News, which has a very specific agenda, and people who support Trump tune into Fox News. And this is dangerous when you just get your news source from one particular area, because then you get sucked into the propaganda and you and the dangers that entails. So this is why I'm saying to everyone today, check out your news sources, find the ones that you can trust, but also, you know, it's worth reading what the opposition or perceived opposition are writing about, to be well informed, is to have a 3D view of what is happening in the world today. Even if you don't agree with what you're reading, at least make yourself aware of it. So don't just cut yourself off and just read one source because you like that source. It's but I think that the social networks, although quite a hostile environment in there at times, the social networks are good for keeping us informed. They're very good at holding those in power to account, and we see this happening all the time by the amount of Twitter accounts that are suspended, and people end up in prison, for sending a tweet. And Saudi Arabia, for instance, there are people in prisons there for expressing criticism. And there are Palestinians who've paid the price in similar ways for criticizing Tel Aviv and the policies coming out of Israel. So the social networks are very lively. They're a great antidote to the mainstream media. The mainstream media is, as I say, the print industry is hemorrhaging, and I can't see what was known once as Fleet Street in London surviving more than another 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I think right now we have come to basically the last question, but again, to remind all the audiences, if you have any question, feel free to write in the chat box comments below the video. So, all right. The next question is, do you think there is any room for a meaningful discussion between the mainstream media right now?
I believe that it's always worthwhile, if you read something that is incorrect or something you disagree with, to send a letter to the editor. Now, when I was editor of a newspaper, we would get maybe 10 letters a day. I would imagine that volume will have dramatically increased with the advent of emails and this. But so, it could be 100 emails a day are coming into a newspaper. If 90 of those emails are complaining about an aspect of coverage on one particular subject, the editor will take notice. So we must become more proactive. And, with the advent of new technology, there's no excuse. Pick up your smartphone and send a letter off to a newspaper or to a news source, to the editor. Keep it polite, keep it short, about 3 paragraphs, and say, this is wrong, this is the correct way, this, just make your points very politely and clearly. And what would be a good idea is if your viewers got together and just started forming little media hubs, so that you can alert each other when something is reported incorrectly or in a biased way or simply wrong, and then get all of your friends in that little media hub to bombard that newspaper editor with complaints saying this is incorrect. And as I say, keep it polite, state the facts, and they might not take any notice one day, but they might the next. And, you can be satisfied in the fact that at least you have done something. Because, the Palestinians cannot rely on the Arab world for support at the moment. But they can rely on the support of individuals out there. And, you know, one person can make a difference. Collectively, we can all make a difference. And, you know,
Yes.
never underestimate your own power to bring about change.
Yes, okay. So basically, we have another question from Brother Ahmad Hilmi. He asked that, what do Dr. Yvonne think about the future of Palestine in the future? With the current media reporting and audience perspectives, will it be better or worse?
I am optimistic about the future of Palestine simply because the Palestinians are a remarkable people. They've shown a heroic resistance over the last 70 years, and it is not falling away. And their peaceful resistance, the Great March in Gaza, was an amazing demonstration. You know, you think about it, thousands of people marched to the border, and they could see the lands where their families came from. I think, you know, the determination, the right to return, the justice, the fact that 140 countries tied to the United Nations have recognized the state of Palestine as a sovereign state. I think that the future is looking bright. I wish that we could see the old guard take a step back. They've had their day. They've tried their best to achieve freedom for the Palestinians. They failed. Step aside and let the younger generation come through. And, you know, there are some amazing Palestinian women out there who have great voices, are very articulate, and they should be encouraged to step up to the plate. And some of the old men who are well past their sell date, they know who they are. You know, step back, step down. You're not serving your people now. Move aside. Let the new generation come through.
Yeah, so I think, like, addition questions to you. You have been experiencing being a journalist for a long time, and now you are actually activist for humanitarian issues. Maybe you can share with us some challenges that you face while advocate for the Palestinian issues, or maybe other humanitarian issues.
Well, you know, I have, with others, broken the siege of Gaza by land, taking a convoy across North Africa and into Gaza, and broke the siege of Gaza by sea by joining the Free Gaza movement on 2 boats. And now I would like to break the siege of Gaza by air. So if there are any pilots out there who want to join me and fly into Gaza, please get in contact. Keep highlighting the siege that the Palestinians in Gaza are under. You know, when we sailed into Gaza, more than 100,000 Palestinians turned up in the little port in Gaza to see our boats come in. And it was the first time in more than 40 years, that's 40, more than 40 years, that a boat had sailed into Gaza port for the Palestinians. That's incredible. That's how long this siege has been going on. This brutal siege, and you know, we must keep raising awareness. I also think that it's not just a Middle East problem. Gaza is right on the rim of the Mediterranean. It's a European issue as well. And so, you know, we we need to be more inventive, more imaginative in our support of the Palestinians, and their BDS movement is a brilliant example of peaceful resistance, and it's really causing a lot of angst in Tel Aviv, just in the same way as the apartheid or the anti-apartheid movement caused pain in South Africa.
Yes. All right. So we have another question from Brother Ibrahim Adham. He said that social media is mainly flooded by youth or young generations, and content creators also coming from youth groups. However, we rarely see content about Palestine-Israel issues or humanitarian in general being discussed in the social media. So what's your opinion? How can we inculcate our young generations to discuss regularly this issue and attract the young generation?
We have to teach the younger generation about the issues in Palestine. Take your children along to marches, educate them about the injustices there. I was 13 when I first came to know about a country called Palestine, and because of the media, my impression at the time was that it must be full of terrorists because they're hijacking planes. The Achille Lauro cruise liner had been hijacked. And I said, why should I sign this petition? And I was asked, what do you know about Palestine? And of course, all I knew was what the media had reported. And when I was told the truth about Palestine, I was shocked and immediately signed the petition and signed up to supporting the Palestinian cause. All those years ago as a 13-year-old schoolgirl. We must get the message out about how the land was stolen at gunpoint from the Palestinians. Those who resisted paid the blood price. Those who fled are now in their millions. Their descendants are in their millions. They want to return to the land. And I said, you know, that Israel at the moment is the size of a South African game park, but there is enough room for everybody. And, you know, that part of Israel that is next to Gaza, it's quite a large area, and there's less than 10,000 Israelis living there. You know, that it's not as though they're being squashed into one tiny little area like they are in Gaza. There's room for everyone. The Israelis have destroyed any chance of a two-state solution, and anybody who thinks or is still talking about a two-state solution is barking mad. But go for the one state. Get everyone in, let Arabs return to their homes and start to function as one state. You know, this is how it's going to happen in the end. It cannot continue. You cannot have this pressure cooker in one of the most volatile regions in the world today continuing in the manner it is going. It's sustainable.
All right, so we have another question from Sister Nawal Irdina. She asked, what could young journalists do in order to receive or convey neutral narratives regarding the Palestine-Israel issues instead of recycling viewpoints of other reporters in their publication?
Well, I think neutral is probably the wrong word to use, because I don't think you can remain neutral as a journalist when you witness an atrocity. You know, it would be like going to cover a court case where a woman might have been raped. You don't give equal measure to the rapist alongside the victim of rape. So remaining neutral isn't probably the right way. But I think as journalists, we should try and give a voice to the voiceless. We should try and support the little person against the big authority, and that's what we should focus on. You know, the injustices, and you can't be neutral over an injustice. It's impossible. And it's not a matter of picking sides. It's a matter of doing what's right.
Yes. All right. So I think right now we have come to the end of our discussion tonight. I would like to thank all the audiences, but maybe for the last time to Dr. Yvonne to conclude everything, and maybe the last message I would like you to talk about, because you are a woman and you are very vocal to advocate about the humanitarian issues. So maybe you have some like a heartfelt message to all the women who is watching here today. Like, it's not a problem for women to advocate on these issues, and humanitarian issues is basically not a religion issue or any gender issue. It is something that all of us have to fight for. So maybe you can conclude and give a last message to all of us tonight.
Well, just thank you so much for all the intelligent questions. I just feel that if we women were more involved in politics wherever in the world we live, then we can help turn the world into a better place. And the proof of this is, you know, we've got this horrendous pandemic at the moment, and Britain is certainly in crisis. But you look at the countries that are coming out of the pandemic, that are doing well in the face of this adversity, and they've all got women leaders. And you know, in New Zealand, you've got the Lucinda Ahern. In Finland, in some of the Scandinavian countries that are doing well. And I just look at these governments where there is also a gender balance, where you have 50 politicians of both sides, and they're doing incredibly well. And I think that is because women shouldn't take a back seat in these matters. We should be in the forefront. And, you know, when people talk about Islam and a woman's role in Islam, you look back into the history, and the greatest period, the most productive period of Islam was when women were shoulder to shoulder with the men, when we had the best architects in the world, the best engineers in the world, the best scientists, the best doctors and physicians, and, you know, when women were in equal position. And, you know, I think that it's time for us to regain and reclaim that position as equals. Not, you know, we're not better than the men. We're not wanting to undermine the men. We just want to be back in our position, standing side by side with the men. And we only have to look back when Islam was at its height, doing incredible things. You just have to look at where the position of women were. It's something I would love to talk about again. Maybe you'll invite me back sometime in the future. But thank you so much for listening. And to all the women, you know, I would say, just remember, we are half the ummah, and we give birth to the other half. You know, we are important, and we have a role to play. So
Yes.
thank you so much for listening, and thank you for the questions.
Yeah, so I think that's the end for our discussion this evening. On behalf of the organizer, I would like to that we have today to the Dr. Yvonne and also the audiences. I would like to thank Dr. Yvonne for being with us this evening. And on behalf of Harmony Malaysia, I would like also to thank our organizer today for inviting us today. So yeah, when we read the comments, basically they are asking to invite Dr. Yvonne again to discuss about more things about Palestine issue and whatnot. So basically, that's all from us. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much.